delay in starting this meeting. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Pinehurst Board of Adjustment. Notice duly given. And we have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. I will note that all permanent members will be participating. The permanent members are Leo Santawoso, Julia Latham, David Kelly, and Mike Marsh, as well as me, Fred Engelfried. I'll chair the meeting. We are being videotaped, folks, and we need to speak into the microphone. Please raise your hands. If I usually do a bad job on that, and I have to be reminded that I'm doing a bad job. First item on our agenda before we go into the public hearing is the minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone reviewed them, our voting members? Any comments or editorial corrections? How about a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Motion from David Kelly, thank you.
Second.
Leo wins. A second from Leo Santawoso, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Okay, next item is to move into a public hearing, and before we do that, I would ask that the parties that will be speaking and be called be sworn. Attorneys are optional because I think they're part of the regulations of the state, but will you be doing swearing, please? Thank you all. Before I open the public hearing, I ask all the participating voting members today, have you had any ex parte conversations about the case that is before us or any financial interest in its outcome? All clear? Okay. May I have a motion then to recess our meeting and move into the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. I will read the public hearing notice into the record, and then we will begin. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive evidence on the appeal from an action and decision of the Director of Planning and Inspections to the Board of Adjustment regarding an application made by Kent Smith, attorney for the owners, Elias and Helen Del Storis. I hope I didn't abuse that. Specifically, the request is seeking a determination from the Board of Adjustment regarding the decision of Planning and Inspections Director in applying the regulatory provisions of Section 9.7.1.4, parentheses B and parentheses D, freestanding sign. This appeal is regarding an A-frame sign for Theo's Taverna located at 38 Chinkapin Road. The property is also defined as Moore County, PID 000300476. With that, Mr. Smith, would you like to start? I'm sorry?
I said I certainly can do that. As a matter of procedure, am I correct that the package that was sent to the owners by the board is part of the record?
Yes.
That is the complete record as required by the statutes.
Thank you, Bruce.
I believe, Mr. Smith, I believe it was sent to you as well? Yes.
I'd like to first call Alan Cassavant. Would you state your name, please?
Yes, Alan Cassavant.
And Mr. Cassavant, let me direct your attention to the particular location that's known as Theo's Restaurant. Did you previously own that property?
Yes, I did. I bought that 26 years ago.
Okay. And when you purchased, did you purchase it in 1998? Does that sound right?
I was 29 years old. I don't know what year that was.
All right. At the time that you purchased the restaurant area, did you have to go through a permitting process for signs?
Yes, I did. was buying the original building off the Whitmers, and there was a bunch of garbage cans, and it was just a real estate office at the time back there. So I wanted to put a restaurant there, so I wanted to match the archway that's out front near Bill Saunders' building. So that's when I built that whole addition. I got permission from Bill Saunders to move all his heat pumps behind that brick wall, and I did all the raised planter beds out there because I had to have some place to put the dirt because I didn't want to haul it away. And then we built that whole bar area right there. And I got permission from Bill Saunders to have a recorded easement through the building and also for the sign out front also. And
So in your deed, there's a recorded easement
that is correct.
as well as an access easement
Access
through
easement.
the breezeway into the restaurant.
Yes, that is correct. That is in the deed. And when I was going for my building, who was the architect at the time? He was right in the village. Bill? God, I can't remember his name. Anyways, so we designed the building. I got my permits, but before I started all this, I had the building under contract. And the village wanted to have more retail versus more offices anyways on the first floor. So, because there was just a real estate office there. And I said the only way that I could do this if I had the sign and I had the menu board out front. Because we were stuck outside, stuck back in the courtyard. I didn't want to miss all that traffic because it's crucial for people to know with a restaurant that it's open. And the one way they know it's open is by having a menu board out front. So I got a permit to go ahead and have the sign out front plus the menu board, which my guys built this menu board. And we used to just lean it against Bill Saunders. And he was always fine with that too. So that was 26 years ago.
So did the menu board remain in where it is now?
Yes, it did.
During the time you owned the property?
Yes, I owned the property for 2 years when I had the restaurant that we ran there, and then I leased it to Lewis for 9 years. So when Lewis was going to lease the building from me, we went through again all the procedures with the real estate agent, make sure that he could get the business permit and everything would stay in place just the way it was. So that's what we
And
did.
did you go back to the village and get permission for the menu board, the A-frame menu board? As
Yeah.
well as the arm and post sign?
Yes, that was already in place, and they just kept everything in place just the way I had it. So Lewis took my menu board, which I had painted green, and he painted it the other color, and that's what he had to get permission for, to change the colors of everything.
So to your knowledge then, has that A-frame menu board been in essentially the same location since approximately 1989?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, and it's the same size and everything, yeah.
Was there ever any objection?
Never.
To you by the village?
Never.
And you said when Lewis took over the restaurant, or purchased the restaurant, did he also get that same access easement as well as the easement for the sign?
Yes, when he bought the property off me, that came because he bought the property, it's in the deed. That is correct.
Okay.
So,
All right. Those are the questions that I have for Mr. Cassavant.
Before I ask Mr. Newman if he has any, I have to correct a protocol issue that's my fault. Could I have a retroactive motion to recess our regular meeting and move into the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Leo. A second, please.
Seconded.
Thank you, David. All in favor?
Aye.
We're official. Thank
I
you.
have to say that again now, do I?
No,
You're
we
on,
can- we
you're
can
on the
still bring
record
that-
anyhow. Mr. Newman?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Mr. Cassavant, as I understand it, you bought this property, and let's talk about what is now Theo's. You bought that property, I believe you said 1989, correct?
I'm 55, and when I was 29, I guess.
Just to get a time frame, and then and your contention is, or your recollection is that it was important to you that you be able to have an A-frame sign out there near Chinkopin on the roadway for foot traffic. Is that right?
I didn't use the word A-frame sign, I used the word menu board.
Okay, menu board,
Yes,
okay.
that's
So,
correct.
what I want to make sure I understand is that you've told the board that you, back in 89, or sometime in the late 80s, got a permit from the village of Pinehurst for a menu board.
For all my signage that I had at the time, which included the menu board,
Okay.
that's correct.
And when you say menu board, are you referring to the large A-frame sign that is out, that's currently in dispute here?
That's the same exact one.
It's the same one, is that your contention?
Yes, I think it did rot, actually, at some point, and they rebuilt it, but they rebuilt it the exact same size
All right.
with another piece of
But
plywood.
but your recollection is that you applied for and received from the Village of Pinehurst sometime in the late 80s
Yes.
a permit
That is correct.
for the A-frame sign that's at issue here today.
That's correct, along with the sign that's out front here, too.
Then you told the board that at some point in time after that, you essentially sold the building to Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, what year was that?
He started leasing from me in 1992. That's when we went to the village together to make sure he could get the business permit, and he could go ahead and change the colors and all that kind of stuff at that time. So that was back in 1992. And then he leased it from me for 9 years before he purchased the building. Okay.
So what permit, again, I apologize if I misheard you, what permit did you and Lewis apply for together in 1992 when he came on board?
All I know is Milt, I forget his last name, he was at US One Realty, he was the real estate agent involved, and he would make sure that all permits was in place for him to do the restaurant and keep operations just the way I had it. So that included signage, that included running the restaurant there.
Did you get some type of additional permit at that time with Lewis in tow from the Village of Pinehurst? And in any of your files that you have with respect to this time period, do you have a copy of the permit that you believe the Village of Pinehurst issued regarding this particular A-frame sign?
I don't have anything from then or from the 400 houses I built in town either.
Do you know whether Lewis has any of the permits that y'all recall being issued to you back in the 80s and 90s?
I really don't know. All I know is when we went back before the town, he and Milt was satisfied from what the town said that he could go ahead and lease the restaurant. That's when he signed the lease with me. And that he could repaint everything to his color schemes. So I think that was the main thing that we were concerned about. Not if it could stay, but if it could be changed to different colors.
And it was your belief when you first got it and when you sold it to Lewis back in the late 80s and 90s that y'all needed a menu board out there near the walkway because having one near the entrance of your establishment wouldn't be as effective, correct?
Well, I considered this the entrance because the easement came to right here, so I considered this the entrance. Yes.
Back up, I didn't hear that part. Is it your contention that the breezeway that, over which you have a pedestrian easement is an entrance to your restaurant?
That is the entrance to my property, or to Lewis's property, which was my property, yes, and that's right into the deed. Because I would make sure that people, Bill Saunders, could not block that off, and that people could walk through there from the main street.
Right.
And, matter of fact, when I built it, the arch there, Bill Saunders, I matched that arch when I built that section also.
Right, and you call it on the sign that's mounted to the wall, the passageway, right? Okay, but at any event, is it your contention before this board that that breezeway is the entrance to the restaurant?
Yes, according to the post office, that's the address that I use for all applications. So all applications, I use the address that, I guess the village does the addressing, is that correct, or is it the county that does addressing? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know, but whoever did the addressing, which was either the county or the village, considered that the entrance because that's how they addressed the property. And all permits from then, telephone book, everything, is still using that same address on Chinquin Road.
Are you talking about where you received your mail at the time?
Where I did applications to the village, where I told people to come, and somebody was gonna make reservations, ask how to get there, what the address was. I would tell everybody what the address was, and the address is Chinquin Road. What number is it? I forget.
It's 38 now.
38,
Right,
yes.
I mean, you own a house, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And you have a driveway with a mailbox, it's got a number on it, and you understand that when you have a mailing address, the fact that the mail person puts the mail in your mailbox at the end of your driveway doesn't mean he's putting it at the front of your house, in the front door. You understand that, right?
Mike, I considered this the entrance, and that's.
Understand that,
And this is the address that the post office uses, that's the address I use for all the permits, and we consider
got you.
this the entrance.
And I understand that, but my point is, what you're contending to this board is that the front entrance begins at the beginning, to the establishment begins at the front of your pedestrian easement out there on the sidewalk at Chinkopin.
That is correct. That's right in the deed, and that's what it says. That is correct.
That's in your deed with Mr. Saunders for ingress and egress for foot traffic for people, so we can't block it off, right? Okay. But at some point, the patrons of the restaurant have to walk down that passageway into the front door of the establishment, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Jeff and Alex, are you able to hear back there? Colette, okay? Okay. Mr. Smith?
Ask Mr. Cassavant just to identify a couple of exhibits. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Sure, okay. Mr. Cassavant, let me show you Respondent's Exhibit Number 1, and ask you if that's the same location of the A-frame menu sign as it was when you owned the property?
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, are those in our packet?
If they're not, I'm going to introduce them in just a moment, or offer them for introduction. Actually, are you going to have any objection? Deeds and stuff? Okay.
No objection.
Let me, if I can, I'll just hand these up, Mr. Chairman.
No objection at all to any of the proposed exhibits.
Record, Mr. Chairman, the exhibits are, Respondents Exhibits 1 through 5, 1 through 3 are photographs of the front of the restaurant with the sign, the menu sign, and the hook that you'll hear some testimony about. Exhibit 4 is the deed from Mr. Cassavant to my clients, and Exhibit 5 is an email that's really a follow-on to what the emails.
Three.
Here, two of them.
Okay, if you want to hold up whichever one you're going to be talking about and lead us.
Other exhibits, I think, that are coming.
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Four. It's a deed. Thank you.
Cassavant, just now that the members of the board have these exhibits, with respect to Respondents Exhibits 1 and 2, are these signs in the same location that they were when you owned the property?
Yes, they are.
And is the menu sign that's in Respondents Exhibit 1 essentially the same sign?
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit difficulty hearing your questions. If you can pull the mic a little bit closer to you.
I'm sorry about that.
Are Respondents Exhibits 1 and 2 that depict the signs in front of the restaurant, are those the same signs that you had when you owned the property?
Yes, that's correct.
And specifically the menu board, the A-frame sign, is that the same sign?
Yes, that's correct.
With respect to Respondents Exhibit Number 4, is that a copy of the deed?
Yes, it is.
And that was in that was in 2002?
Yes.
Is when the actual deed transfer went.
Yes, and he rented from me 9 years before that.
All right. And on page 3 of the deed, in the highlighted area, is that the easement you were referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
And And Mr. Cassavant, one last question. Do you have any financial interest in the Theo's Restaurant building or in anything having to do with this particular hearing?
No, I don't. I'm just here just to set the record straight.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Just have one. As to Exhibit 4, the deed, the highlighted portion, Mr. Cassavant, if you look at the last highlighted portion, it says easement together with an easement for the maintenance of a sign facing Chinkapin Road on the building located on Lot 611. Said sign to be no larger than 3 feet by 4 feet and located in the same location as the currently existing sign. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
That's the sign that actually hangs on the wall, correct? Or on a post?
On a post right now.
Right, okay.
yes.
So that's not the A-frame sign. And so the only easement that's involved with this one is the sign that is not at issue in this case, correct? I simply want to make sure the board understands that the deed, Exhibit 4, has nothing to do with an easement for the sign that we're here about today. But you would agree with that, right? It has nothing to do with that sign, the A-frame sign. Sure.
Yes, the easement allows me to go ahead and put, as you said, the hanging sign there. I always considered that property myself, the easement on that. And, but Bill Saunders never had a problem with that, and he knew I was going to put the menu board out there, and he was fine with that all those years.
If I may just approach so I can find out what exhibit, hang on a minute. I think you've,
And as I said, it's been there for 26 years.
right, since the board has Exhibit 1, Respondent's Exhibit 1, this is the photograph. Just so that we're clear, the deed reference from Exhibit 4 regarding an easement is referring, I believe you said, to the sign that is attached to the post, correct? That says Theo's Taverna Restaurant with a little hand sign pointing inward down the passageway, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. And so Exhibit 4 and any easement referenced in Exhibit 4 only pertains to that sign there, correct?
Yes, it's
And
for a
then-
permanent sign, that is
Right.
correct.
And then the menu board, which is the sign to the left of it, the A-frame menu board, that's not referenced in this easement, is it?
No, Bill Saunders and I had a verbal agreement. Maybe I should have had my attorney at the time specify that better, but I didn't. But we all knew that was there, and and Bill Saunders was fine as long as it was in that little garden area.
But did you ever ask the village if the village was fine with having it in that garden area next to the other Theo sign?
As I said, I have gotten permits for that. For both of those, I got permits originally before I did anything. I was not going to buy this building and put a restaurant there unless I could have a menu board there. That's
Right.
how important it was to have a menu board there, or I would not have bought the building. I would not have restored the building. I would have left it a real estate office, and it would have just been like that.
And I understand that. I understand that. Just out of curiosity,
Asking me, so, but, I mean, that's how it is. I mean,
I understand, and I understand, and everybody's recollection is what it is, and I mean nothing by my questions to you. But as you sit here today and you recall back to when you got this permit from the village for the A-frame sign, did anybody from the village tell you where it had to go? What was your understanding of how close it had to be to your building? What did you understand this permit that you say you got in the?
the way I understood it, it had to be in this section. It could not be in the right-of-way because this is what Bill Saunders wanted also. So we had to fill out a application showing where the signs are going to be, what size the signs were going to be, and it was going to be in here. What I used to do is actually just lean it against the building. But,
Okay.
you know, so it was
But
just.
as
a bit
far as
differently than what I did.
respondents' exhibit number 1, your recollection is that you and Bill Saunders and someone from the village agreed that that's where the A-frame sign could go, either there or, as you said, at some point leaning against the building. Okay, and that's your recollection, right?
That's what I know. That is correct.
Okay, nothing further.
Folks, would you like to ask any questions of the participants or get clarification? David, start with
Yes.
you, please.
The respondents, Exhibit 3, what's that showing us? Is that how the sign was originally affixed to the wall? Is that what it's, because in the easement, it tells me that the sign is on the building. Is this, did it originally hang here, or was it changed or something?
I don't
Or is that what this
remember.
is?
My clients will address that, but I
Oh,
think
okay.
that's actually addressed in your package.
Okay, I was just curious about this one, sorry.
Mr. Cassavant, you say you got a permit to install the A-frame sign,
Yes, that is correct.
and you don't have a copy of that?
I don't have a copy of any of the permits of houses I built or anything else. I've owned hundreds and hundreds of properties here in Pinehurst, and I don't have any plans or anything from any of those transactions that I've done through the last 30 years. I do not.
Thank you.
Are the village's responsibility for maintaining records of permits? How long, what type?
Well, we do maintain records.
Well, you're asking him if he has records. You approved it, so I would think you would have records also,
Well,
if it exists.
it doesn't exist, and we don't have any record that a permit was ever issued. In fact, I think the record will show that these types of A-frame signs were not even a permitted type of sign until the ordinance was amended in 2009. So prior to 2009, no Pinehurst ordinance even permitted the use of an A-frame sign. They were illegal signs in Pinehurst. There's no permitting process for a legal sign.
On to that?
The Village Hall burned down, so.
I think they're aware of that. My response, I think, is I'm not aware of any village ordinance that prohibited the A-frame signs.
Well,
What our testimony is going to be and evidence is going to be is that
Well, if I understand the point being made, is that there was no permitting process for such signs prior to 2009. So there wouldn't have been a permit issued?
That is not correct. When I get permits to build, or put a sign on stuff, the village, the towns, they ask for so much information. Even right now, the permitting that I go through, it's ad nauseum what we have to do to get permits there. And they would have never allowed that. They would have made me take it down that first week. Again, I would not have bought the property. As soon as I got it under contract with Rodney Ann, wanted to turn it into a restaurant, I would not have bought the property. I made sure, that's why I have such a strong recollection, that I had the menu board, got a permit for that, because I would not have bought it. And I made sure of that. And again, I don't have I don't remember if the original sign was on that or hung out front. I don't remember that. But I remember what a big deal it was for me to have the menu board, and I did get a permit for that. I'm testifying under oath about that. And my guys built it, and it's been there. It's been there for 26 years. And Lewis painted it a different color. And myself, Milt, and we went in, talked to the village to make sure they had no problem with Lewis taking these signs and painted it a different color, which he did. I don't know what else to say.
Newman, anything?
Nothing further from this witness. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Helen Dallas-Doris to testify next.
Got to share the mic, at least for me.
State your name, please.
Helen Delajuris.
And you're married to Louis Dallas-Doris?
Yes, Elias.
Elias, okay. And did the two of you purchase the Theo's Restaurant from Mr. Cassavant and his spouse?
We did.
And that was in 1992?
1992.
And can you tell the board if the menu sign, let me have
Yes, that is the menu sign, and then that's the permanent sign that's,
What exhibit are you showing her? Thank you.
Taken fairly recently.
yes, it was. That, the actual menu sign used to lean up against Jim Saunders' building. And we recently, when we started having the issue about the signage, we replaced it because we had heard that Mr. Saunders complained, but I talked to Mr. Saunders, he said he did not complain, and it was ironic because we have a good working relationship with him, that he actually, in one of the exhibits, the one that you were talking about.
It's your point,
he-
Exhibit 3.
Exhibit 3, that he put that, that screw thing, and he said, Helen, I'm going to do this for you so that your menu sign doesn't fall over. So our menu sign for all these years mostly have been hooked to Mr. Saunders, that little tip. But it was my decision that when this started coming up, because I really didn't understand what was wrong with that signage, because I know that we had approval from the village, and I think it was, I want to say it was Mayor Bethel, I'm not sure, who actually came out to see where the signs were going. That's when I had it moved, and it just put it leaning against up our sign, because I was thinking, well, maybe they think the sign's too big or something, but it was approved for a certain size anyway, and I was trying to find a way to remedy something that I really didn't understand.
So the sign.
But it had always been in that location for since 1992, since we took over,
All right, got it.
plus with Alan, so
so
26 years, I guess.
So that's my question. So the
Yes.
sign, as it's depicted in Exhibit number 1,
Yes,
has been in existence certainly ever since you and your
Yes.
husband bought the restaurant?
yes,
And it's been utilized there?
yes.
Okay.
mhm.
And prior to you receiving some notice from the village in 2016, has there been any objection from any village officials about the location of the community center?
No, none.
And how important is the menu board sign to the success of your restaurant, in your opinion?
It's very, very important because it gives visibility, and it lets, I think what's really important is the fact that it lets people know that we're open. If they don't see that sign out there, they think that we're closed. And I've actually had people tell me that. We didn't know that you were open if it wasn't there, because we have to, certain times during the day, we have to raise the board and change out for lunch and dinner. And if they walked by and they didn't see the sign, they're like, oh, we thought you were closed. And we were really open, because we stay open all day. We don't close.
Now, did the current mayor make any suggestion to you about speaking with Mr. Saunders about the sign?
Well, it was really interesting because I know the mayor, and she frequents my restaurant, and I felt like that I had a friendship with her, that I could approach her, and I was in Greece, and I emailed her. I'm like, what's going on? I'm ad-libbing. I don't know my exact wordage. And she had said to me,
I don't just object for the record to any kind of hearsay about what the mayor may or may not have said, but
well, I mean, I think some of this is in writing, so,
they wanted
but-
to introduce exhibits. I have no problem with that. Any oral conversations, I believe, is covered by the hearsay rule.
Okay, well, I was informed by her that someone complained, and when I probed about it to find out who, because I was very shocked, Jim Saunders' name came up, and so I was really shocked. And so when I got back from Greece, I contacted Mr. Saunders, and he said that he did not complain about that menu sign whatsoever.
And let me show you Respondent's Exhibit number 5, and ask you if that's an email between you and the mayor.
It is.
Which is part of this email
Yes.
chain that's as a part of the official record.
It is.
All right.
It is.
And is that your explanation of what the mayor
Yes.
suggested that you do?
It is, it is.
Okay.
And I was told in writing by her to talk it over with Mr. Saunders, that that the village is just a referee in the matter. And I did contact Mr. Saunders. He said, Helen, I'm the one who put the screw in for you. I have no objection for your,
And object to whatever Mr. Saunders says. I'm happy to have it if he's here.
Saunders made any further objection to you, to your knowledge?
no, and
In
the
writing-
sign.
in writing or
No,
otherwise?
no, not at all. And the sign is still there. Not at all. Now, am I,
What are you gonna say?
okay.
About another sign, another A-frame?
Well, I think that, because I've been trying to figure out what has caused all this, and, because there's a lot of signs in the village that are not in ordinance, what you call ordinance.
What are some examples of that?
Multiple signs, multiple A signs. At one point, the new coffee shop had 3 A-frame signs out. Even now with the wine shop has multiple signs out. The olive oil store, theirs is further than what y'all consider 12 feet from the entrance. The Cool Sweats, theirs was too. You used to have the Beyond the Gallery. Theirs was like 50 to 100 feet away from their entrance. And my thing is, I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't. I think whatever is necessary to bring somebody into your business, your establishment, is a good thing, as long as it's appropriately designed and cleaned, and I think it's a great thing. It really bothered me because I felt like that we have contributed greatly to this village. Greatly. I mean, I am a property owner. I pay taxes here. I am the only restaurant that the Carolina will send their customers to. That's saying a lot about Pinehurst. I'm sorry. And it says a lot about the work. Sorry. I get emotional. It says a lot about the work that my husband and I do. Nobody else works 7 days a week in their business. So I felt like it was a personal attack on us by the village, in all honesty, because I've spoken to other people in the village and not one of them had gotten letters, and it surprised me. So I was like, what has caused this to happen to us? And I think I know, I'm not saying it is, it's my opinion. We have an olive oil sign that is also an A-frame sign. That came out, and I did. I put it out front. And in all honesty, I did not know that it was illegal. I didn't know. And it wasn't until Chad, and I forgot what his position was in. He was with the historical thing, making sure everything was, and we had to do some work on our cooler. And he said, Helen, you know you're not supposed to have that olive oil sign out there. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And he told me, he said, well, you're okay as long as no one complains. I think someone complained about that sign and not my menu sign, and that's what caused this. So when I got the very first letter from the village, I even told my husband, oh, they're talking about the olive oil sign. It's got to be the olive oil sign. I immediately removed that sign, and it has not been out there. It has not been out there since then. So I'm hoping that that is just what caused this, because I do feel like it's a personal attack on me and my family.
I don't have any other questions of Ms. Oswald.
Thank you very much. Please don't make me try to pronounce your last name as well.
You can just call me Helen.
Okay, awesome. Helen, you're my new best friend. All right, Helen, I need you to take a look at what your council has marked as Exhibit Number 1. It's the picture of the A-frame next to the hanging sign. And I want you to put that next to Exhibit Number 3, which is the picture that Mr. Kelly had a question about regarding the hook, okay? Now, as to the hook in Exhibit 3, where is that hook located as in reference to Exhibit 1? Can you point it out and then turn it towards the council?
Pretty much. It's about, let's see, from the top of the headboard, it's probably about 1, 2, 3, It's the fifth brick up. You'll see a little indent.
Okay, can you just, let me, if I can come over there, point out to me where.
Want me to show it?
See
Okay.
it?
It's
Oh, there.
Thank you.
Now, just while we're on exhibit number 1, as you see to the left of the menu sign, you've got the passageway and you have a door right there on the right. Just for the board's reference, you go in that door, whose business are you in?
talking about inside the breezeway?
Yes, inside the breezeway. I'm talking about the
We're
breezeway.
in Bill Saunders' building, which is now the real estate office.
Okay, so that's the real
Berkshire.
estate office. And again, just for a lot of folks know this since they're Pinehurst residents, for clarity. So that first door there is Bill Saunders' office. And then as you continue down that breezeway, it looks like there's almost like a bookcase kind of thing there. You see that?
Magazine rack.
Magazine rack, and that's for real estate sales, right? So that part right there is the front entrance of Bill Saunders' office, isn't it?
I'm assuming so.
And what's the name of his real estate company?
Berkshire.
Okay, now, Exhibit 1 doesn't show anything on the left-hand side of the breezeway, but what, if anything, is down on the left-hand side?
There's a door.
Okay, and what's on the left, go through the left door, what's through there?
It's Berkshire.
Okay, and what is that another real estate company?
It's the same real estate
Okay,
company.
so it's the same real estate company, but it's got 2 entrances in that part of the breezeway, correct? And then as you continue down that passageway towards your restaurant, is there anything else, any other business before you get to Theo's?
No,
Okay,
it's just us.
so, all right, perfect. Now, you had mentioned that you put this A-frame olive oil sign out there, and you didn't know that it was illegal, right? Okay, and did anybody ever, when you say you didn't know, that really means that you really didn't check to see whether it was legal or not. It was something that you thought would improve foot traffic, so you wanted it out there, right?
Well, I just saw so many people with more signs than what I had.
Right.
I mean, I just saw signs, I just like, okay, I'll just go put it, but it wasn't like on the sidewalk or anything.
Right, right. Now,
It wasn't a permanent sign, it was one that we would just take in and out.
do you keep records at Theo's? Do you have access to any of the permits that we're talking, that y'all say you got?
We do not. A lot of our files, we had a flood and a lot of our files were destroyed. I don't know if those were destroyed or not. We have some really old files in a warehouse with a lot of equipment. And I don't know if it's in there or not. I don't know.
Just so the record is clear, have you ever looked to see whether you could actually find any of these old permits that you're talking
Yes,
about?
I did. I pulled some out. We have,
Did you find some?
no.
Oh, okay.
No, but I did look, but I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much.
Pedestrian traffic up and down the sidewalk there along Chinkapin Road, how do they gain entrance into the area of your restaurant?
They can only go through the breezeway. When that breezeway, my understanding from Alan, when that breezeway, and he had this agreement with Bill Saunders, who was the father at the time, they wanted access to both his real estate and and the restaurant at the same time. So that is the entrance to both the real estate office and our restaurant. There's no other entrance.
Nothing further.
Questions from the panel?
There is access from the alleyway, isn't there?
Yes, but that alleyway was used to get people to the post office and to try to create traffic. But that alleyway is not a state road, it's a private-owned road, so no one will enter our courtyard that way by that access.
But pedestrians walk down the paved
There
alley.
hasn't been pedestrians walking down that pavement since y'all closed the post office. They can, but they
Well,
don't.
we didn't close the post office. Uncle
Well-
Sam did.
Well, I don't know. I wish
didn't
the
do it.
Okay, y'all didn't, excuse me.
How old, I'm sorry?
The- What, he's talking about the post office?
Yes, because they give gas tanks over there. Two big tanks.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about that.
Looks like you don't know what happened there.
He's talking about the alley, that other entrance that you were talking about. He's saying that the village caused the lack of pedestrian walk through there because the village had allowed them, the Drum and Quill, to put two huge gas containers
Next my window.
next to our window, and people stopped
block
going
the
through there
things.
on that small little walk area.
Yeah,
It's not there now because we switched over to natural propane, and so did Drum and Quill, but a lot of pedestrians quit because they were afraid if something would happen, and they're right, you have like this 3 foot of sidewalk, and you have these great big 2 gas containers on it, so it did stop a lot of the traffic.
When were these pictures taken and shown by exhibits 1, 2, and 3?
Some recently, and some within the year. Some later. We started this journey last year. I just emailed him some Friday that were still in non-compliance
But
as of Friday, so.
you're talking about exhibits 1, 2, and 3, though.
Yes, sir.
Oh, just last week, I guess? I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about other signs, I'm sorry.
I think she's referring to the other photos that were in your package. I think we're taking it very.
I understand. How many more establishments in the village center have situations the same as yours?
I have no idea.
We have, we have in our packet an email from Theos Taverna dated July 6, 2016, and it's signed by both you and your husband, and it's to Mayor Fiorello and Mr. Casavant. Can you find that?
There are a bunch of emails.
I
on this.
know.
What's
I
the
know.
time? What's
The
the
date?
time of the email?
The date was July 6, 2016, time 1:21:27 a.m., which is early in the morning. Have you found it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The first, second, third paragraph, you're saying you were approved in 1992, and the previous owner, Mr. Casavant, was approved prior to us. During Alan Casavant's ownership, the portable menu signs location was agreed and approved by the village officials that the entrance to the property was the beginning of the breezeway and Chickapin Road. That, I read that to say that you had an approval, or Mr. Casavant had an approval from the village that the entrance, that breezeway entrance was the legal entrance to the property as far as the village was concerned.
That is correct. Are you asking me or him? I'm sorry.
Oh, either.
That is correct.
Uh-huh.
That is correct. They actually came out when we were doing the sign. They actually came out and actually basically told us where we are to put the sign.
I'm curious.
And they said that our street address had to be on the post that shows that this is the entrance, like the 38, which back then it wasn't 38. I can't remember. I think it was 40 or 140. It's changed 2 or 3 times. And they said that this is your front entrance.
The deed for your property doesn't include the breezeway. The breezeway belongs to Mr. Saunders, and you have an easement over that property. Is that correct?
That is correct. I just know that when they came out, and I want to say Mr. Bethel was one of them, I can't remember, but they actually came out to look at the site again, and we tried to tell them, it's the same place where Alan was doing it. And they're like, well, we're going to come out and see. And he did, and they're like, well, yes, this is your entrance, so you can have your sign there, but that's all I know.
And that sounds like,
That
at
was in
least as far as
92.
you were concerned, that was an informal discussion with the then mayor. Is that correct?
Well, it was the mayor and some other officials from the village. I'm not sure. It could have been with planning. I'm not sure who they were. I'm not sure.
Do you know if that was ever reduced to writing by the village?
I don't know.
Okay, okay,
I really don't know.
sure. Okay, thank you.
I had a question for Mr. Newman. There's a memo or a letter dated 26 April, signed by either Angel or Angel Smith.
Oh, 1 minute, let me go. We're all going to
Sorry?
struggle trying to find this one. I've got May 24, 16. You have
April
another one?
26, 2016?
April 26, 2016. Got it.
Okay, so that, I think the next page after that is an enclosure to that saying, hey, your signs
Right.
can go here, but they can't go here?
Right.
Okay, so the easement that we have with the highlighted, the deed with the easements highlighted means that memo's or letter's not correct, right? Do we agree? That the sign, not the tombstone-looking one, but the one hanging here, that one's okay, according to the easement. So the thing
That
that's
has never
here,
been an issue. The hanging sign is
understood,
not
but-
an issue.
right, so this 26 April letter with its attachments that says Theo's sign's not allowed here, that's incorrect, right?
No, it's absolutely correct, because A-frame signs, in addition to the hanging signs, were being hung out there on Chinkapin. What you got, if I can stand up here.
Right.
This is the front here, the signs are not allowed out there on Chinkapin, because that's not the entrance. That's what she's saying, A-frame signs are not allowed there because it's not 12 feet from the entrance
Right,
of your
but,
establishment.
right, it says it must be placed within 12 feet of the business's main entrance, but this easement says that they can have a sign there where it is.
Right, but
right?
that's not an A-frame sign, and that is a sign that's been there as established with an easement of the property owner back and basically in the ground since A-frame signs have not. So that
Understood.
type of sign that's hanging there back in the day was not an illegal sign. In other words, you could get permits for that, and it's part of an easement process with Mr. Saunders and him. That's a legal matter. It has nothing to do with zoning. I mean, you can't have a easement that says, and by the way, I'll give you an easement, you could put a trailer park in Pinehurst. Easements control the rights between the two private parties to the deed and nobody else. It does not affect, and it cannot affect third parties, and certainly cannot grandfather any type of zoning or even affect a municipality's right to zone. Municipality has a right to zone regardless of what private parties put in their easement. And this one is an easement only for ingress and egress, and saying you can have the sign out there. And that's Jim Saunders saying that.
Okay,
And
so,
Alan Cassavant.
so it's the village's position that all these signs need to go away?
No, the village's position is only the A-frame sign needs to go away, because A-frame signs are, you have to have a permit for them. It has to be 12 feet from the road, 12 feet from the entrance of your business. And that particular A-frame sign is, like any A-frame sign, portable. You can move it. The fact that we have pretty pictures today that have it leaning here, or pretty pictures when it's actually bolted to keep the wind from blowing it off the wall, or putting it over here, whatever the foot traffic you are trying to direct, you basically put an A-frame sign to try to direct traffic. We don't have a problem with that. But our ordinance says two things. You have to have a permit for an A-frame sign, and second, it can only be placed 12 feet from the front entrance of your establishment. That's what the ordinance says. And here, We don't have a permit. No one's never been applied for. And again, as the board is well aware, our inspections department is complaint-driven. We don't go out and just try to find problems and create problems. When someone lodges a complaint, which is what happened here, there's a process in place. And Angel goes out to determine whether a violation is present or not. And if she perceives one to be, she writes the person a letter. That starts the process. And through that process, we end up before you.
Does the complainant have to identify themselves?
No, we accept anonymous complaints.
If Mr. Saunders owned that sign, could it be placed there? If he needed an A-frame sign, could he put it in the easement right there with their permission?
My understanding is that that sign has been there long before, I'm talking about the post.
No, I mean, if Mr. Saunders put a sign there that said real estate, an A-frame sign,
Could he put it there?
yes.
No. The
Why
reason
not?
is
It's within
because
12
it's-
feet of his, front of his door.
I'm just guessing from the photograph that they've introduced as Exhibit 1, that's not even close to 12 feet by his front door. His front door is in the breezeway. The entrance of a breezeway, a pedestrian easement, is not the entrance to the establishment. If you look at this, right, and so the long story short is this. I think everybody agrees that for A-frame signs, you have to have a permit. They claim they got a permit for this sign back in the 80s or 90s. We don't have it. They don't have it. We do know that these types of signs were not even a permitted sign until 2009 amendment to the ordinance. So until 2009, you couldn't have an A-frame in Pinehurst. Now, I thought I was answering their question. Right. No, and I'm not saying that they agree. I'm saying that I'm trying to disprove a negative, whether you had it or not. What I'm saying to you is that to answer your question, whether this sign is permitted or not is not an issue today, the hanging sign. The A-frame sign is the only issue. That's the only issue. Because that's the one that led to the violation notice and the appeal to this board.
I have a question for Bruce.
Yes, sir.
Can the post sign be modified in any way, enlarged or what have you, to function as a menu board and both indicate the location of the front door?
Leo, I believe there's a prohibition on permanent signs of having changeable copy unless it is a church or a school.
So menu changes from day to day would not be able to be made on chalk or wood or whatever?
On permanent ground signage, as a rule citywide, we do not allow changeable copy on the permanent ground sign unless it's for a church or school.
So they couldn't even indicate something as simple as open?
Something as simple as open would be a different type of story, and we have that where people will hang when they're open and closed. And that's not necessarily changeable copy as you're trying to, the intent there is for public safety and so forth, that you're not trying to read a sign as vehicles or pedestrians pass by
Gotcha.
and may create a safety issue. Just as people oftentimes will put up a flag that says open.
I have a question for Mr. Newman. I'm sorry. Do you want- in our packet, we have a picture that I believe was submitted by, I'm not sure who it was submitted by. Hold on, there's so much in here.
Staff package.
Right, but I think it was an attachment to Mr. Van Camp's
Right.
letter. And it shows Sal's Italian Bar and Grill, which I believe is in the theater building?
Could I just,
Sure.
I'm 55 now, I have to, and I don't have my glasses.
When you turn 55, you're supposed to be issued a pair of these.
All right, I know which photograph it is, and the
Okay.
question is.
I'm wondering, for a business that is in the interior of a building,
Right,
so like the theater building, there are some stores in there that are in the interior.
right.
What's considered their entrance for the sake of putting out an A-frame sign?
Well, I think the issue has not come up. Normally, it would be, because A-frame signs are portable, normally it would be 12 feet from the front entrance of the business. And the reason would be this, the reason for that is this. If you take that picture of Sal's, and you say, let's look inside the theater building, and let's say business is booming, and we got 15 businesses out there. So every single one of them wants to have an A-frame sign that sticks further and further out. That is precisely why the public policy behind A-frame signs is, we understand the need for foot traffic, we get that, we'll have a permit process for it, but it has to be 12 feet from the front door of your establishment. And so whether that sign complies or not, I do not know. I don't know when the picture was taken. It's not an issue that's here today. If it doesn't, if, for instance, someone generates a complaint to us, we will investigate it. And I understand and I accept as true what Helen said, that she's seen other A-frame signs through the village. I have too, but it's very, very difficult to talk in a vacuum because we don't know where that sign was, how close it was to the front of the estate. We don't know these things, and I can't cross-examine anecdotal evidence, but I know it's out there. I don't have any dispute with that,
Okay, thank you.
where it is.
If I can ask Bruce then, say we have an interior business in the theater building that does not have a workable or ingress and egress other than through the front door of the theater building. You know, they might have a fire door, but their foot traffic comes in through the front door of the theater building. If they applied to the village for a permit for an A-frame sign, where would that sign need to be placed?
It would be within the interior courtyard of that building.
Within the theater building, not
Hence-
out front?
Hence, if you notice on the theater building, we've worked with them on what's known as reader board signage or directory signage. And that is on the front of the building so that you know what businesses are inside. Then once you're inside at your main entrance, you could have additional signage.
So if the eyeglass shop per se wanted to indicate that they were having a sale with an A-frame, then in order to get a permit to put out such an A-frame, that A-frame would be in the interior of the building.
In which case, no permit would be needed based off the definition of signage being visible from adjacent properties or the
Gotcha.
public right-of-way. So
Gotcha. So
you want
they
to go
would-
in, you want to go inside your own building and do whatever you want to do.
They would not be allowed a permit for an A-frame exterior to the building.
Exterior to the building, except in instances where they maybe had a main entrance from the exterior.
Right, correct. But if they did not and only had, as I said, a fire door or something like that.
And the same would apply to other buildings, say the Rizuk's building and others where you have multiple tenants that use shared entrances. The
Okay.
correct way to sign those is kind of like the breadcrumbs, you know, you get to the building, then you get to the reader board sign to know what establishments are within it, and then you proceed to find your location.
Gotcha, thank you.
We all clear at the board level? Anything else, Mr. Smith?
Testimony.
Pull the microphone closer too, please.
State your name, please.
Elias Dalisouris.
Mr. Delasaurus, you've heard the testimony here, and to move things along, did you and your wife purchase the restaurant from Mr. and Mrs. Cassavant in
Yes.
1992?
Yes, sir.
And at the time that you purchased the restaurant, how important was the A-frame menu sign to your decision to purchase the restaurant?
That's the most important. If you don't have a sign, you can't open the door. So we go to the city 3 times, and we talk about before I signed with Allen.
All right. And now, as you were negotiating with Allen, you were aware of the business, was the A-frame sign in existence at its same location there?
Exactly.
Before you
Allen
ever
here,
bought it?
Before, the same sign is for Allen here. I'm not saying it's nothing there. I'm not putting not one there, except the colors.
Okay. And so before you purchased the restaurant, explain to the board your recollection of what you had to do to get approval from the village for the location of that A-frame sign. What did you have to do? Did you have to get a permit?
Yes, like I say, me, Allen, real estate, we go 3 times to the meeting. And we asked to give us permit for these 2 signs, and they agree.
And did you have to give them a drawing of the signs, or did they look at the signs?
I can't remember now because Milt, the real estate guy, handled all this stuff.
All right, okay.
It's 25 years ago.
All right. And since you have owned that restaurant in 1992, has anyone, up until last year, had anyone from the village ever told you that that A-frame sign and its location was not proper or was illegal?
Nobody.
And did anyone from the village ever tell you that you needed to come and apply for a permit?
No.
In fact, when you received the notice that brings us here today that was signed by Mr. Reed, (2017), the one about the sign.
Yeah.
Is there anything in in this notice of why you're in violation? Is there anything in there? This basically says that the complaint is that it's located greater than 12 feet from the business's main entrance. Is that what you understood their complaint to be?
Yes, yes.
And where do you consider the main entrance of your building to be?
For sure, over the front, but over here, where's the signs?
All right, you're pointing to the sign, the permanent sign, once you
Yes.
show them.
Right here.
All right.
If you take this off, nobody can find us on the back.
Would you have bought the restaurant?
Never I'm
If-
going to
if-
buy a
If the
restaurant.
menu board had not been
No,
allowed?
no,
with that?
sir.
Have you and your
Well,
family-
anybody can open a restaurant with no ice?
And have you and your family invested a substantial amount of money into that restaurant and its renovations?
Yes.
How would it affect your business if that sign, that A-frame sign would not be able to be there, in your opinion?
I think bad. And I think if be like that, I have to look for other location, not to be here. It's not worth all this pain, you know. I have other cities who give me $1 million to open a restaurant. They give me $1 million to open.
Stop.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Dalzell.
Thank you. May I also call you Louis?
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Just take a look at that same May 25th, 2017 letter that your lawyer was having you look at. At the second to the bottom paragraph, the second to the last sentence, it says, based on measurements performed by village staff when taking the attached picture today, the sign is approximately 60 feet from the main entrance to your business. Would you dispute that the sign where you currently place it is 60 feet from the front door of your restaurant? Would that sound about right? I know you haven't measured it yourself, but you don't have any quarrel with that measurement, do you?
No.
Okay. And I believe, as your wife said, one of the reasons you want it out on Chinkapin is because that's where the foot traffic is and people driving by, right?
I can understand that things.
One of the reasons you would
prefer to have the A-frame sign, your menu board, out on the sidewalk or leaning against the post sign is to increase foot traffic to your business, right?
Sure. Over there is the traffic, it's not on
Right.
on the post office sign.
Right.
This way we put the post office.
Understand.
Alan say, put the post office sign. People to see that the post office is there.
Sure. Thank you. Been very kind. I have no further questions.
Mr. Smith, do you have anything else? I'd like to, and Mr. Newman, I assume you'd like to have some people talk. I would suggest a 5-minute break for anyone that needs it. And we'll reconvene at 20 after. Can I have a motion to recess for 5 minutes, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Leo. Second.
Second.
Who was that?
Me.
Thank you, David. All in favor? Aye. Recess.
Everything's going to sleep.
How you been?
Do you?
This is our fifth.
Yours. My third. Yeah. Well, no, my fourth. forgot we had a staff meeting.
Yes, sir.
Turn your mics on.
Okay, I'll call to order a continuation of our regularly scheduled meeting, and we will re-enter the hearing, which was already motioned. And we will wait for, whoop, there's Mr. Newman.
We will call Bruce Gould. I will leave it to the board the fastest way to do this. I know we've been here for a while. Bruce normally would present for the board the village's position and show the photographs. I believe we've got them on computer. I don't know that we need to go through the whole thing because some of it has been introduced, and I'm trying to streamline this for the board and for the parties here. So since he's been sworn, I'll allow him to go first, and then I'll lead him through some things that I want to make sure the board understands. Go ahead. And if you would, start with the photograph that I just referenced to you about the three signs. All right. Now, what is this photograph depicting? And I'm use this only for illustrative purposes. This is simply the other side of coming from the different direction of some of the photographs that have already been introduced. What is depicted there?
This is what appears to be, or what is, the permanent ground signage at Theo's. The back side of the disputed A-frame sign, an additional A-frame sign that was placed on the site, which I believe was previously referenced as the olive oil sign, as well as some additional A-frame signage that is further down Chinquapin in the vicinity of the alley just past Drum and Quill.
And as far as the one that's down there past that planter, do we know who put that sign there? What business?
My recollection is that was the photo shop that was down the alley at that point in time.
This is the signs here for Theo's, or the hanging sign, the olive oil sign, and then the sign that's actually at issue here, the A-frame sign, which is the light blue one that appears above the Theo's hanging sign, correct?
That's correct.
All right. When did the village amend its ordinance to permit portable A-frame signage in the village?
That was amended in the latter half of 2009. The regulations are here, at which point in time we defined what an A-frame sign was. We defined what a pedestal sign was, and what wall boards were. And previously, there was a provision within the PDO that dealt with portable signs and their prohibitions. At that point in time, the portable sign prohibition section was amended to then exclude A-frame signs, wallboard signs, and pedestal signs located in the Historic Preservation District from those regulations and set up a permitting process in which they could be established.
So that's been since 2009.
That is correct.
And before 2009, they were prohibited in that district, correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Through the village throughout. The only place where they're currently allowed is only within the historical district.
All right. Now, one of the board members had asked you a question earlier about how the village staff measures the 12 feet. What is the guidepost to that? You've already answered that question. Is that the uniform standard that village staff attempts to use in every entrance, 12 feet from the front entrance of the establishment?
That is correct.
Okay. And that's what the ordinance says, correct? If you look at what you have up there, which is B number 2, quote, "The sign placed by the occupant is located within 12 feet of the main pedestrian entrance to the establishment." Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And staff has always construed that establishment to mean the front door of the actual business, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's what's referenced essentially in Kevin Reed's letter that I had Lewis confirm about the 60 feet. This particular A-frame was being placed approximately 60 feet from the front door of Theo's restaurant, correct?
I can't speak to the measurement myself as I did not take it, but the answer would be yes, it is greater than 12 feet based off my observations.
All right.
And how we define what is the main pedestrian entrance to the establishment.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Smith?
Joel, how long have you been employed by the Village of Pinehurst?
15 years.
Prior to the 2009 ordinance that you're referencing, did you have occasion to be down in the village?
Yes, sir. I would have to say I did, based off of my visits to the village and, the assumption that it was out. Did it catch my eye or I notice it? Not definitively.
Records of anybody approaching Theo's and advising them that it was not in compliance with the ordinance?
I do not.
And there's no further definition of main pedestrian entrance other than those 3 words, correct?
That's correct.
It doesn't say 12 feet up from the front door, does it?
It's not.
Official interpretation of that.
Again, the main pedestrian entrance. It's the village's interpretation, sir.
Well, and you are the village for purposes of
I understand. Today's proceedings.
fighting a violation, right. And then with respect to the notice of violation to my clients, it references section 9.7.1.4, sub B Bravo and D Delta, is that correct?
Which notice are you referring to?
The one of May 25, 2017?
I have it. Thank you. Yes, it references 9.7.1.4D as well as 9.7.1.4B.
That's the violation that's the ordinance that my clients are being cited for being in violation of, correct?
That's correct.
And the specific language in that violation is that the A-frame sign must be placed within 12 feet of the business main entrance, correct?
Yes.
It doesn't say the main pedestrian entrance. It just says the business main entrance.
That is correct.
And the notice of violation does not indicate anywhere therein that my clients were required to obtain a permit for the sign, correct?
As I read it, it does not.
Was it fair to say that the substance of the violation is that, in the village's opinion, the sign, there was nothing wrong with the sign itself as far as the signage, the size, the color, anything like that? It's just the location.
I would actually contend that that sign, I believe there's a height requirement that it be limited to 4 foot in height, and looking at those photos, it may be taller than that.
Y'all measure the sign before you cited my client for the violation?
We didn't cite the sign relative to the height of the sign. We cited it for the location.
But you, in essence, said take the sign and move it to within 12 feet of the front of your entrance, correct?
I believe that's what the letter says.
I mean, at that point, were you then going to cite him for the sign not being the right size?
Again, you're speaking to a letter which I did not write, and but Helen has indicated, I think, that the sign may be compliant relative to height, but you're asking me to ascertain whether something's compliant or not on other measures in which I don't feel comfortable making that determination based off of not having technically examined it for those purposes.
You would agree that the street sign or the street number sign for the restaurant is mounted on the post of the sign there, the arm and post sign, correct? Street number 38 Chinquapin is located on the post for the permanent sign.
Which photo are you referring to?
Well, look at Exhibit 1, Respondent's Exhibit 1, and Respondent's Exhibit 2.
Based off of the address that was given, it would appear as if the address is partially visible on that sign. It's blocked by the portable sign.
How about on Exhibit 2? Do you see 38 on the post?
Yes, in Exhibit 2, 38 is visible.
Let me ask you to look at the package of materials that were submitted. And ask you to go to the email from that's dated Wednesday, July the 6th, 1:48 PM, from the mayor to Jeff Batten. Do you see that one? It's January the 6th, 2016, at 1:48 PM. That's the email that sort of starts at the time, or at the top, I'm sorry.
Would you, I was looking, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, could you repeat which email?
It is dated Wednesday, July the 6th, 2016, 1:48 PM is the email, is the first full email at the top. At least in terms of pages, what I have is it would be the
Second chain of email?
third page, I think, yes.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you.
See that one? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you see the email there just below at 12:52 PM from Jeff Batten? On that same page?
So I have an email July 6th at 1:21 a.m., but there's no, I don't see a corresponding email from Jeff Batten on that same page. I've got it now.
This one right here.
Yep.
Have it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the end of, well, strike that. The beginning of that email, am I correct that it starts out, that's correct, Jim Saunders was complaining about 2 A-frame signs being placed in front of the breezeway, I guess breezeway, by Theo's main sign. Do you see that?
Yes, sir. I would assume this email is accurate. Yes, sir.
And then he goes on to say, I don't think he was opposed to one A-frame sign, but they put out the menu board and a sign selling olive oil. Is that what that says?
That's correct.
Then down at the end of that email, does that end with a sentence that says the only complaint he had relative to Theo's for the village to look into, however, was the placement of 2 A-frame signs?
That's what it says.
And am I correct that the olive oil sign was removed and has not been there for at least a year?
I can't speak to the duration in which it's been removed, but it has been removed and has not been seen upon recent visits to the site.
And is Mr. Saunders' complaint the reason that we're all here today?
That is correct.
And Mr. Saunders' complaint was that there were 2 A-frame signs, correct?
That appears from this document. The individual that received the complaint had indicated so.
Now, that complaint, does it appear that that complaint by Mr. Saunders has been remedied by the removal of the olive oil sign?
I think that's how you interpret when someone's complaining about 2 A-frame signs, is the removal of 1 A-frame sign take care of the situation, or is the situation with the 2 A-frame signs? You're asking me to interpret what Mr. Saunders was implying by his complaint being 2 A-frame signs.
Let me ask you this way. Has the village received any further complaint from Mr. Saunders about the A-frame signs once the olive oil sign was removed?
To my knowledge, we've not received any secondary complaints.
Thank you very much. While you're on that, Mr. Smith asked you if Mr. Bill Saunders' complaint is really the real reason why we're here today, and I believe you said yes.
Jim Saunders, but that's correct.
Jim Saunders. And that's because Mr. Saunders' complaint started a process, correct?
That is correct.
Once that process, we receive the complaint from Mr. Saunders, we send Angel or someone else from inspection to go out there and investigate the complaint, correct?
That's correct.
Whether they find 2
5 A-frames or none, that starts the investigation, and that leads where it leads, correct?
That's correct.
Now, and Mr. Saunders certainly doesn't have the ability to enforce our code. He simply complains and starts a process as to whether there is a violation of our code, correct?
That is correct. Or any other complainant or citizen.
Do you have section 9.7.1, the purpose of sign control regulations?
I do.
I want you to pull that up, and while you're pulling that up, I also want to ask you a quick question about Kevin's letter that Mr. Smith asked you about. If you'll pull that.
May take a moment to load.
All right, 9.7.1, general purpose and intent. This is under section sign regulations, correct?
Yes, sir.
And just for the record, I know I need you to read section 9.7.1 through subparagraph D, if you could, just so that it's in the record.
Purpose of this section and other sign standards contained in this chapter is to support and complement the various land uses allowed in the Village of Pinehurst by the adoption of standards concerning the placement of signs. These standards are adopted under the zoning authority of the village to achieve the following. A, to encourage the effective use of signs as a means of communication in the village while preserving the rights of free speech under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. B, to maintain and enhance the aesthetic environment and the village's ability to attract sources of economic development and growth. C, to improve pedestrian and traffic safety. And D, to minimize the possible adverse effects of signs on nearby public and private properties.
Okay, now, with that purpose and intent in place, go to the section 9.7.1.4D as in dog that we are here about today, for which okay.
Referencing the portable A-frame wallboard section of.
Correct. And so we're dealing specifically with A-frame signs here, and I want you to read into the record the precise language in the PDO as it pertains to the 12-foot requirement.
Signs shall not interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, shall be placed within 12 foot of the main entrance to the building, and shall be removed when a business is closed, except for wallboard signs and barber pole signs.
All right, now, as you look at what you have up there under portable A-frame, you started with signs shall not interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, correct?
That's correct.
Shall be placed within 12 feet of business main entrance.
Correct.
And shall be removed when business is closed, except for wallboard sign and barber pole, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so there, and now we're going to go from that to Kevin's May 25th, 2017 letter that Mr. Smith asked you about when he was referring to the village's position. He says in that letter on page 1, therefore, it is the position of the village breezeway is not the main entrance to your business, and the sign
is in violation of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance since it is not located greater than 12 feet to your business's main entrance. You see that?
Yes, sir.
That's based on basically what the PDO says, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Kevin specifically cited the actual provision, whether he quoted it verbatim or not, he did actually cite in his letter the violation was under 9.7.1.4 D as in dog, correct?
That's correct.
And in making that statement of 60 feet, 12 feet from the main entrance that Kevin has in his letter, that follows what Kevin says about trying to understand what Lewis's and Helen's position was. Right above that, where Kevin says you, referring to Lewis and Kevin, had previously asserted during an on-site meeting with myself and others that the breezeway is the main entrance. You see that?
That's correct.
So the sentence that Mr. Smith asked you to read was essentially part of Kevin's overall colloquy in this letter, saying, Lewis and Helen, you contended this when I was there, but the village's position is this, and here's the PDO provision, correct?
That's correct.
That's all that Kevin's letter says, is notifying them of the violation.
Yep.
And A-frame signs, again, just so the board is aware, were first permitted, as you said, by amendment in 2009, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything, Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
The A-frame signs that were in existence at the time the PDO was adopted, were all those business owners required to go and get new permits for the existing signs?
Again, there were not signs that were legal at that point in time. So if there was one that was to be brought into compliance, they should have brought in and came in and gotten permits. Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Nothing further for me.
Okay, why don't we take 1 minute each, put a wrap on it. I'm going to hold the hearing open, but beyond that, when it is held open, it will be for the purpose of us asking last-minute questions we may have of any of you. So you want to start, Mr. Smith?
This is really important for my clients. I'll try to go fast.
2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this matter is before you on our contention that the inspections department is incorrect in its interpretation and application of the PDO that's been cited regarding the A-frame sign that's displayed at Theo's Taverna next to its arm pole sign located at 38 Chinkapin Road in Pinehurst. The historical context of this matter before you is important. You heard testimony from Mr. Cassavant and from my clients that they went before the Pinehurst village officials and they were told that they needed a permit for these signs, and they specifically and unequivocally said that they would have never purchased these buildings for a restaurant without knowing that those signs, and specifically the A-frame sign that we're here to talk about, were going to be allowed, and that the village looked at it and blessed it and said that it was okay. And in fact, it's irrefutable that until 2016, not a single violation was ever issued to my clients saying that their A-frame sign and its location was ever not in compliance or was never legal. The fact that it's been there for 25 years by two property owners was with the approval, consent, and acquiescence of the village and without objection. Matter for this board to consider. Also, you see that Jim Saunders made the complaint about two A-frame signs. The olive oil sign's gone. The complaint, we would contend, is gone. My client spoke to Mr. Saunders. She contends that, it's testified over objection, that he didn't have any problem with where the sign was. In fact, you've got evidence that he placed a ring there on the side of the building to allow the sign to be there. What's important is the interpretation of main entrance. If the ordinance was going to say 12 feet from the front door, it would have said 12 feet from the front door. You have to allow the main entrance to be interpreted reasonably and in conjunction with the unique nature of Pinehurst and of their restaurant. And that's what we would contend, that it clearly, the purpose of the signage is to allow patrons to see these places, and that a restrictive and incorrect interpretation of the ordinance is what's at hand here. If you look at this thing for the purpose for which it was intended, the breezeway going into that is the main entrance. And we would contend to you that you can find that that's the main entrance and not in any way find that they're in violation of the order. Thank you.
I think it's 4 minutes to you, Mr. Newman.
I'll take only one. These are nice folks. I have absolutely no doubt that they believe in their hearts, and they have a recollection that somehow back 30 years ago that someone applied for and received a permit. They don't have any record of that. I can't disprove their recollection. I have no doubt that they believe that. I have a very, very difficult time believing that their memory is accurate. It's two different things. And simply because there was no process for getting an illegal sign back in those days. There just wasn't. They weren't even permitted till 2009. You have to read the ordinance as a whole. One of the reasons I asked Bruce to read the purpose and intent of the sign ordinance regulation, enhance the ambiance, protect pedestrian safety, is so you don't have a giant glob of businesses putting out as far as they can get towards the street on sidewalks, all these A-frames. So we have a rule. It's a rule that's enforced when complaints are made to us. Jim and Bill Saunders, there's nothing wrong with them, but they generated a complaint. There's no question about that. That starts the process. The question then is, we see the sign, does it comply or not? It's 60 feet from the door. The answer is it does not, and they don't have a permit. So the ordinance requires that they get a permit, which they can do, and the ordinance requires that it be no further than 12 feet from the business's main entrance, the main pedestrian entrance. You walk into a restaurant. That's what it says. That's what it means. It doesn't mean some easement that was granted for a breezeway to allow your customers to walk 60 feet between other businesses while they get to them, any more than it would mean that in the theater building. They have pedestrian easements, but that's not a zoning easement. It has no effect on the village. So we've asked that the violation, or that Angel's decision be upheld. Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to keep the hearing open for a minute. Board, several things to consider. One is it would take 4 votes to uphold the appellant. Secondly, we have to remind ourselves that our responsibility is to make our decisions based on competent material and substantial evidence. And it requires us to be, I think, very thoughtful as we consider this, what we heard and what should be considered. I open it up for any conversation. We do have choices. We can come back and talk about it. We can continue the meeting and come back and talk about it. We can talk about it and make a vote for a decision.
Just a clarification, Fred, on the number of votes to approve or deny. It's just the plain majority, is it not?
No, this is 4 to uphold the appellant.
This is not a variance. Okay.
I think Bruce is checking it, but
My understanding is this not being a variance, this is an appeal of an administrative decision. It would be a simple majority.
okay. I read it differently, but I'll yield on that. Discussion?
I had a question for Bruce. May I? Please. Okay. So the rules regarding signage changed in 2009.
That's correct.
And so prior to 2009, when did the rules start?
It's upon village incorporation and in one shape or form in 1980,
From 1980, there were signage rules.
correct?
And to your knowledge, those signage rules prohibited the use of A-frame signs?
Prohibited the use of portable signs
Portable signs. Okay,
in general,
thanks.
which A-frame signs by definition would be a portable sign.
Another question for Bruce. Is
Yes, ma'am.
there any mechanism by which a non-conforming sign can be grandfathered over a period of use? Is
It's
that
a-
contemplated at all in our ordinances?
Yes, there's provision for non-conforming signs that are established legally and then become non-conforming. The difficulty here is you're talking about a portable sign that is removed. The reason there's provisions in here that it be removed every evening is if the sign rules change, they do not gather grandfathering.
So by virtue of the fact that it's brought in every night, it cannot be grandfathered?
That would be our interpretation. If you remove a non-conforming use, non-conforming structure, by definition, it loses its grandfathering. Just as if you had a non-conforming shed on your property or some other non-conforming structure or a non-conforming ground sign, if it were to be removed, a permanent sign, if it were to be removed, you don't get to replace it.
And did I misunderstand you when you the first part of your answer to my question indicated that for something to be non-conforming and then grandfathered, it had to have at one time been conforming, and then ordinances changed, making it non-conforming?
That is correct.
Okay.
I would refer you to the procedure that was included in our package, section 6.2, 6.25E. And this is 6.2 says appeals of administrative decisions. 6.25E says the zoning board of adjustment shall not reverse or modify the contested action unless there is a concurring vote of at least 4 of its 5 members.
Thank you.
Anyone else at the board level want to discuss?
Question.
Yes, Mike?
Just for my clarification, you're not asking for a variance to have a legal and approved sign, A-frame sign, placed 60 feet instead of 12 feet from your building. You're not asking for that. You're asking to appeal the decision of the administrator based on providence and the confusing definition of main entrance. Is that correct?
That was the matter that we were cited for, and that's what our appeal was. You know, we had a
Thank you.
Sorry, one more question for Bruce. In the notice violation, which May 24, 2016, that was cited before? No, I don't think that's the one, I'm sorry. I should never turn the pages. It was a discussion about what is a main pedestrian entrance, and it was indicated, it wasn't Angel's letter, it was indicated that, excuse me?
Kevin Reed's letter.
Yes, it is, that a main pedestrian entrance, it implies that a main pedestrian entrance cannot serve more than one business. Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so he is saying, the fact that a person can pass through the breezeway, visit other businesses, and never enter your business through its main entrance. So the contention seems to be that a main pedestrian entrance cannot serve more than one business. Is that correct?
For instance, that's correct.
In this instance? Is there ever an instance when a main pedestrian entrance can serve multiple businesses?
I would think not.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from the board to the participants?
Maybe staff can clarify the definition of breezeway for me.
I think the term breezeway was interjected during the discussions of what this actually is. Based off this letter, it would appear that breezeway was an interjected term that was being used on a site visit to define the passageway through the Saunders building onto Theo's property.
Well, to me, a breezeway is not the entrance to a structure. A breezeway is an entrance to an area, but it's certainly not, in my opinion, an entrance to a business, a building, a residence, a shed, whatever. It's not an entrance to a structure. And I would have to say, the staff's interpretation of the ordinance should be affirmed and upheld.
Appreciate your comment. I'm going to get to it in 2 seconds. Does anyone else on the board have any other questions of the participants? May I have a motion, please, to close the hearing and re-enter our regular scheduled meeting?
So moved.
Leo? Second. David, it's a pattern. All in favor?
Aye.
We're back in our meeting, and now, Leo, I'll yield to you again. I think you were making a motion.
I'm going to make a motion that the Board of Adjustment should uphold the decision made by village staff that the sign is in fact in violation. A breezeway is not the main entrance to a structure.
Is there a second on that? I'll second it and open it up for discussion.
So I think the entrance to this particular restaurant is rather unique. And if you take all the signs away from there, nobody goes back there. So, and I also have a lot of problem with the fact that you can walk down the street and see 50 of them and one person gets cited. I'm having a tough time with that.
When I talked about competent evidence, we must avoid, I think, past practice. We're dealing with a specific set of circumstances.
Right.
One business owner.
So then it comes down to, so where's the entrance to this? When I went there, I always thought that I was, that's where I was going into a courtyard in a building, and I'm used to design in Europe and how you enter in and you have courtyards. And so that, I wasn't even aware there was another entrance on the other side or a walkway or something. So that's...
Unfortunately, these folks are caught in a quandary, and I would say, I would refer to this case as a case of unclean hands on both sides. The village perhaps has been lax in not reinforcing or enforcing all of the signs that are shown in the documentation, but by the same token, whether and the folks involved in this case are not, it's just a bad situation that can't be made any better to modify an existing sign or anything like that. But in my opinion, the breezeway is the clincher for me, and a sign located at the exit of the breezeway, 60 feet or so away from the main entrance to the structure, in my mind, indicates that the staff made the correct interpretation.
And I appreciate that the folks who work for the village aren't the sign police, and they don't go out every day to cite violations to collect revenue, that only a complaint initiates the process. But I tell you what, put yourself in the other guy's place. I sure would feel picked on if my sign had to go away and everybody else's gets to stay.
I'm sure that by complaint is a nice way to run things. So were I the complainant, I would go downtown and I would file 20 complaints, and I would just flood the village with complaints. I don't think they're going to do that. I probably, in my case, I probably would have asked for variance. Can I get a legal sign, get a permit, and place this sign 60 feet instead of 12 feet? That I could have easily gone with. That would have been no problem at all based on the layout. But given that, I still have to say that the village is correct, even though I'm having a hard time with the provenance of 27 years. They're well-known by every official in the village, and nobody has made a complaint about the sign of the people that are actually in charge of signs and responsibilities for enforcement. So it's a very difficult decision, but I still have to go with the village's interpretation, regretfully. So I'd like to see him come back with an appeal or a variance.
I agree 100%. You know, the law and order strict constructionalist in me says that the village is absolutely right. That, you know, the way you answered every question that I asked, I have to say, yeah, they're not in compliance with the ordinance. But we have a situation where historically they have been doing this, there have been no complaints, and you're exactly right that the fairness, you know, sort of retribution gene in people would say, well, fine, I'm going to file a complaint against everyone else too. And, you know, that's no way to run a city. I agree, a variance would have been a great way to look at this. And in fact, at home before we came, I flipped through the requirements for a variance, and in my own head went through the exercise of how would I have approached this had this been an application for a variance? How would I have applied for one? So yeah, I agree. Regretfully, I agree.
Yeah, probably had the olive oil sign not been placed out there, wouldn't be here. So does that kill all the other ones? Does that kill all the other signs? Excuse me, I don't think the one sign that's hanging there on the post with the 38 on it is in question. The other A-frame sign, I guess. But by nature of it, Bruce told us that, hey, a sign that would have a menu that would change every day can't be, it couldn't be mounted, say, on the other side of the post there, for example. Unless it wasn't changed every day, unless it told the things that were on the menu every day, for example.
I do agree with what has been said by most of you, not completely with what you have said, David. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we have to deal with the responsibilities we're given. And as much as I, like anyone else, would be tempted to look at past practice, there's no evidence of permits, and there's an ordinance in place. And in fact, it is highly likely that other people are in violation of that as well.
But let me remind you, there's no evidence of no permits either. Because we had floods and fires and death and pestilence, and everything went away.
But David, then we're dealing with the absence of competent evidence, and we are where we started. Are you ready for a roll call? Your motion is actually to uphold the village, and I think we can deal with it that way as opposed to uphold the appellant.
Yes, sir, that's it.
And did we have a second? I seconded.
Seconded.
Yeah. Roll call, Michael.
I support the motion and the second. I do.
I don't agree. I think that the entrance, the de facto entrance to it has become this, and so that's why I don't agree. Yes.
I am for.
I'm for.
4 votes out of 5. The village is upheld. The matter is closed. I would say off the record, I hope that there's some way that the village can cooperate with Theo's and find another way that they might have a solution that would help them promote their business. I don't know what that is, but I think intent is everything.
Certainly.
I have one more matter before the board, which we can handle very quickly. Thank you. Everyone wants to get home and eat and have a drink, but sitting at this table right now with the permanent members, we have 2 chairs. And we don't have a vice chair of the Board of Adjustment. And I would like to suggest and nominate Julia as vice chair of Board of Adjustment if I'm not here to carry out my duties.
That's a motion?
Yes.
I would second that, if she accepts.
I will accept with some tutorial from the village on how to run this meeting
Oh, I thought that was me.
properly.
Was I the co-chair or something, or what?
No, you're vice chair of Planning and Zoning.
I thought I was vice chair of this.
No, you're not.
How come how come I had to sit in
Knows
your
if
place
you
then?
are.
The last time you were gone, how come I had to do this?
Because that was a Planning and Zoning meeting, not a Board of Adjustment meeting.
It was?
Yeah, you referred to it.
That was
Thought that was just-
Community Presbyterian Church.
Oh, okay, I thought it was Board of
Have
Adjustment.
it if you want it.
No, that's okay. Holy Anna. No, I thought you were de facto
Do
firing
we
me.
need to vote?
Yeah. Could we vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Gwen, it's anonymous.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done.